Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
So, Emily, Skittles is back in the news again, and it looks like they're going to get banned in California. And I'm talking both the candy and the strain.
Yeah, who knew that candy could be so controversial? But back in March, the California Assembly passed Bill 418 regarding the toxic chemicals that are found in Skittles, not just in Skittles, but in other products like one that I actually really like, the hot tamales. And Pez, of course, like one of the funniest Seinfeld episodes ever, had that Pez dispenser on the legs scene. But yeah, and then there's, I don't know, Sai, what else is going on around Skittles, but said a little bit differently.
Yeah, right. Skittles, as I believe they're pronounced, is the cannabis strain, right? So they made news recently with MJ Biz reporting that the makers of the popular strain Skittles, which borrowed its name from a trademark owned by Wrigley, will discontinue the product line because of legal pressure from the candy giant. So it sounds like they came to some sort of settlement or proposed settlement with this, which is surprising, not surprising. And I do want to talk about just kind of strains in general and the branding of strains. And, I don't think it will stop with Skittles. I think, we've already seen it with Gorilla Glue, if you remember way back. Gorilla Glue was a very popular strain. Now I believe it's known as GG number 4 because the Gorilla Glue brand came after him, right? So I think this is wide open, but it's pretty funny, the parallels. There's a lot of funny parallels. Speaking of, yeah, wow, weird. So there are so many. This thing is so crazy, right? Because you've got Wrigley, and Wrigley is involved in the space indirectly, not the organization, but a family member with Bo Wrigley and the brand Parallel. And you've got the candy, the actual candy, getting banned in California, along with the strain name, right? So Skittles, whether it's candy or cannabis, will be hard to come by in California pretty soon.
Yeah, and one might have said that cannabis made the candy much better, but in that world. But yeah, this is like a real kind of slugworth story where it's like the battle of IP and Willy Wonka, as we've referenced before. But it seems like Wrigley keeps landing in the press. It was funny when the parallel story emerged and when we understood the Wrigley family was getting behind cannabis. I was pretty excited by that because it demonstrated to me that a family with a long history in consumer products saw a parallel to this industry. I thought that was an interesting vote of confidence in terms of looking at things that have happened in the history of our country and where things could be going for our particular industry. Unfortunately, there's been a little bit of turmoil and drama around that name, but it's nonetheless something to watch for. But we know that these kinds of issues are also coming up more broadly in terms of the naming of products. And do you want to talk about strains first, and then we can talk about the product stuff that we're seeing on the broader headlines?
That works. We'll stick to, because the strain thing is an interesting narrative, right? For the longest time, before there were brands, there were strains, and the strains were, to me, felt like brands unto themselves. Like you would walk into a dispensary and you would look for, Blue Dream, and the Blue Dream, was a brand. It's almost like going to a store and looking for, a certain brand of something, right? You knew that they would carry Blue Dream. Obviously, it's nuanced, and the strain was being produced in different ways, and who knows on the genetics back then and what have you. But they really did develop this kind of brand persona to me, and I think that was accelerated by the work we did at Leafly and just really focusing around strains and starting the consumer journey with strains. And you fast forward to today, and there are a lot of strains. I mean, there have always been a lot, but it's just exploded. But I think as much as we've seen a ton of innovation in the strain space itself, where I don't think we've seen a lot of good innovation is in the naming of the strains. And I think that this is what you're seeing here happening with Skittles, right? And this again to the Gorilla
Mm-hmm.
Glue point, this has happened before. And so I pulled some data from Headset on the top, selling strains, in the markets that we track. And right out of the gate, there's some issues. Girl Scout cookies was another one, right? GSC, right? Gorilla Glue, Girl Scout cookies. That was one that Girl Scouts of America came after the industry on that one, and now it's GSC. Um, so those were well known, but I think right on the horizon we're going to see some more. So just looking at this list that we published, Runts, which I believe is a cookies genetic, is top of the list right now, right? And that's a candy. I don't know who makes Runts. I don't know. Maybe not. If it was Wrigley, probably would be rolled up into this, but maybe it is Willy Wonka or Wonka Candy or whoever, but we should look it up. But I think that they, seeing this, maybe they're not aware, but seeing what's happening with Skittles.
It's Ferrara, by the way.
Ferrara, don't they make
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
What else do? They do like the lemon heads. Remember those candies?
Yeah, they are a institution. Yeah, Runts. Oh yeah. That's not my favorite
Runts.
candy. I do like a lemon head though. Yeah, lemon head. Ooh, atomic fireball. Yeah,
Okay.
that Juji fruits. Another Seinfeld reference. Red Hots. Oh my god, Fun Dip. Oh man.
Fun Dip. I've heard of some like Delta 8 like products that people are trying to do like fun dips, and we'll talk about the Delta 8 stuff here shortly. But yeah, I mean it's Skittles, Runts. Looking down the list here, you've got Oreos with a Z. It's like, guys, you can't
No.
just add a Z to the strain name and think you're gonna get away with it. It's like you wouldn't go to the grocery store and see Oreos next to a bag of Oreos with a Z, and it's like, oh yeah, it's totally fine, totally fine.
It's totally fine. It's like Hydrox versus Oreos. You have to keep it separated.
Okay.
And you guys, I mean, the Headset team is the founder of Leafly. Like you guys know strains pretty well inside and out in terms of cataloging these things over the years prior to
Yeah,
this.
and there's a lot, right? And then I think besides like the IP problem, there is this trend over the last handful of years of moving to more dessert like strains, things like sherbet, wedding cake, gelato, ice cream cake, which I guess is better than the old naming conventions of things like cat piss and these others that used to be like top of the charts.
Alaskan Thunder.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
The dessert like strains are good, but I do think after the IP work is done, and all these IP infringing strain names disappear, then I think that the next battle, not with the brands so to speak or CPG, but the next battle just for like hearts and minds of cannabis is going to be, look at all these desserts and candy like names that may be attractive to children, right? Which is like, I know, a bit of a stretch, but like in this space it feels like they're going after anything they can to kind of point to challenges. So I just feel like it is a bit risky to continue to name them like this. And I know you mentioned alcohol has some parallels, right? I mean, you see vodka brands that are kind of targeted like this.
Yeah, like Smirnoff has like birthday cake flavored vodka, which by the way, like I'm offended. I think that thing is that is disgusting. Don't do that.
I can't imagine.
But they're not clearly going after me. Like I'm far too old for that. But and I do think, yeah, if we can just look at history and get ahead of it, as I always just try to think about how do we give less fodder to the prohibitionists and the people who are opposed to this or the people who try to use scare tactics. We've seen this in other categories, right? So like they limited flavors in vapes because it was specifically going after kids. So now it's down to like tobacco is like the flavor that's amenable essentially. And you could look at what happened with Joe Camel where it was considered a cartoon. And it's just not a mystery anymore. I mean, even here in San Francisco, right? Burners, Bay Area, Northern, California based with his strains and his background, but even on Hate Street, of all places, they wouldn't allow the store to be called Cookies because they thought it was targeting children. It's Burners on Hate. And so,
Really?
I mean, there's a
Wow.
theme here. Yeah. I mean, San Francisco's a little precious about I mean, like, and by the way, then at the next corner, the guy's selling something else that's far different and less productive than cannabis. But, my point is the point, which is that the regulators are always looking for flags and the prohibitionists are always looking for fodder. And so maybe there's a way to get ahead of this so that we don't create our own obstacles. But that's, we'll see. It's an evolution for sure. And similarly, something that I've been having a little bit of a tantrum about is all of the fly by night Delta 8 products
Right.
that have hit the market, which are not tested and don't have a clear transparency of a supply chain. I think it's not really fair competition to those who do have to move through a regulated supply chain with cannabis or hemp. But now we know the FDA had to send out letters because of packaging things and naming things going on with those products. So what did we see, Sai?
Yeah, I mean, it was the FDA and the FTC combined going after
And
this,
the
right?
FTC,
Because
that's right.
yeah, and I think it went to like 6 brands out there. There's got to be more than 6 that are doing this kind of stuff, but there's an article on CBS News, and we'll link to in the show notes. And and I've seen this floating around, but one of the organizations that they went after is called Doctor Smoke. Not a legal medical doctor, I'm sure, but the Doctor Smoke brand makes a Doritos, and the Doritos look like straight Doritos. Like at the very bottom, it says THC and it's got a little THC zero sign. And even on the THC zero sign, it says, something about the hemp bill, farm bill, um, something farm bill, which is ridiculous. Like like we
Hmm.
got in front of it because we put the farm bill sticker on it, totally fine, right? But it's like Doritos nacho cheese. You would not know. I mean, the bag is a different type of bag, but the color is the same. The bag has, you tear it and it's got like a Ziploc, but insane, just insane that people think that this is going to be okay. And, I don't know, maybe it's just a short term cash grab. There's no way that Dr. Smoke, being a
Definitely.
doctor, can think that this will be a long lasting product line for them. It's just, I mean, that seems insane. But they're getting, cease and desist, or the FDA and the FTC are coming after them, which is interesting that the FTC is involved, right? Because you are dealing with trademark here, um,
Hmm.
and that's another issue, right? But these headlines are terrible, and these are running on the news, the evening news with the demographic that generally isn't as favorable to the category watching, right? And of course they see this stuff,
Yeah.
and obviously the news is going to highlight this, but this stuff is out there, right? And
Yep.
at gas stations and online, and just it just doesn't give the industry a good look. And I don't know, I think we got to be self-regulating, self-policing, and other industries have learned this, right? Alcohol got in front of it long ago, and I do think that
Hmm.
if alcohol had the kind of lens like cannabis has on it right now, where people are really looking at it, people are really scrutinizing it, people are thinking about, what does a reschedule look like? If that was alcohol, I think they'd be in some hot water over like a birthday cake vodka. I think it would be tricky for them.
Yeah.
Maybe they could do it. Maybe it's okay. Everyone has a birthday, right? But the idea that, I don't know, just it's a kind of a double standard. But I think we need to kind of self-regulate, like what alcohol has done, to keep the feds out of it, right, as much as we can. And self-regulating doesn't mean like Doritos. That's fine as long as you put like a THC zero farm bill sticker on the corner and use their brand. They didn't even use a Z for
No.
Doritos. Like at least Skittles
Nope.
and these others throw a Z on there. But yeah, it's a really bad look, and
No.
certainly something that needs to get fixed. You mentioned the vape. I know in California there was an assembly bill, and they're looking at flavored vapes, and flavored vapes. In our data, we sent some data in. I mean, it accounts for a lot of sales for these brands, right? And so you have this situation where
Yep.
you don't want to lose these sales. They're already struggling in markets like California. We're going to talk about June sales, and California is having a tough go. And so if you pull all those products, I think it'll be detrimental to the industry near term, right? But if we're thinking longer term, that's what we need to be worried about, right? As eventually it's going to come for us, right? Eventually,
Yeah.
just like vape and nicotine.
I mean, I'm not opposed to terpene flavored vapes. Like that's not a thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the e-cigarette vapes, which had like very specific flavors that are very much kind of to the point we were making, and that the regulators determined were the bulk of what drove interest with the younger consumers and the underage consumers. I think we can be more nuanced about it. So I think like a terp, but there are some brands in California that definitely push it on the flavors and even the form factors that appear to be kind of like kiddie form factors. And yeah, again, like fine, as long as you're selling to 21 and over. But I think it just won't be surprising to me if the regulators at some point slap it around a little bit. We've seen it before. But should we pivot to good news?
Yeah, so let's talk a bit about June. I mean, we're well over a week into July here. Time is flying, and I thought we'd take a look at some June numbers. So there are some pretty good headlines coming out, and it doesn't. I'd say it depends on the market, but there were some pretty good wins from a June record breakers. Let's start with maybe the smaller of the markets. Connecticut. Connecticut hit a record with $24 million in sales, which is a fine amount. I think Connecticut has some room to grow, and we'll talk about like per capita and what per capita looks like. But I think on a per capita basis, still pretty low. But Massachusetts had a massive win, right, with 132 million in sales in June, and that's a record for them, which is great. And Michigan as well. So Michigan also had a record-setting month, continuing to grow there. And I know some of these markets have a bit of price pressure challenges, but even if pricing is lowering or stabilizing, as some seem to be, it's great to see these numbers climbing in these markets. So that's pretty exciting. But I would say that it's not equal in every market. As I pull the data, when I compare, let's see, January sales to June sales on a growth rate basis, Michigan, probably the biggest winner, 20% growth versus January. Florida grew like 5-ish percent. Illinois grew maybe like 3 to 4%. Massachusetts, almost 10%. But markets like Arizona, California actually contracted a little bit, which is kind of tough, and kind of goes back to that what I was saying about just the California market in general. We are seeing a bit of contraction still, and it does seem a little weird. I know June is kind of the start of summer, and I feel like California is a tourist heavy destination in summertime, right? So we should see good sales. I didn't look at 2022 June versus 23 June. Maybe that'd be worth taking a look at. But we'll see. Maybe it'll pick up in July. But a little disappointing. But not to focus on the negatives there. I mean, Massachusetts is a big win. Michigan is a big win. Connecticut is a big win. And it's good to see these markets continuing to grow.
Yeah. I mean, part of me was when I was looking at the California month to month, I was trying to see like, okay, maybe it spiked very heavily in April for 420, and then people are burning through, their promotional acquisitions during that time, procurement during that time. But I didn't see that. Like you pointed out, it kind of peaked in March. And so, I mean, I'm seeing store level data is showing that individual stores are seeing some growth, but I think like on a like a full statewide trend, that's not an encouraging sign.
Yeah, I am sure there are stores out there that are outperforming the market significantly, but
Mm-hmm.
just when we look at the
Mm-hmm.
entirety of the state, I think some areas maybe are doing worse than others. So yeah, that's tough. But then I pulled some numbers on a per capita basis because I kind of want to get a sense like what does June look like on
Mm-hmm.
a per capita? So like sales on population, right? So per capita sales for June, the state that we track that has the highest actually is Michigan at $25.37. That's looking at June sales numbers over their population, right? So that's significant. So June numbers in Michigan were, let me get those numbers here, 255.5 million, which is great. So sizable number there. And then I think this is comparing to Michigan population 2021, which was 10 million, right? So that's how you get the number, which was $25, which is the highest of the markets that we track at Headset here. But that's followed by Massachusetts, because Massachusetts had such a great win. So you see $19 on a per capita basis for Massachusetts. Also amazing. So Michigan and Massachusetts doing really well. I think a fair amount of access. People are purchasing cannabis. To contrast that, California was at $9.67 on a per capita basis. So that's half of Massachusetts. That's less than half of Michigan.
I mean, what you're seeing here is, and we know, we know our friend Hirsch Jane talks about this a lot, and like in California, we've seen retailers struggle and shut down. Like I know Palm Springs stores have closed, and the way this works is we have these wide deserts, and then we have these clusters of retail in LA, San Francisco, Palm Springs, and Palm Desert, and then you have wide swaths of the state with nothing, and so you're seeing Michigan is opening retail. You're seeing Maryland is opening retail. And what's it showing? Sales are growing. It means there's interest, there's access. And it is not, we do not have a supply demand issue. We have a supply access issue. And I think in California, where the retailers are struggling, we did have that transition to the point of tax collection is at the retail instead of at the distribution. And we don't know. And we also know, as we pointed out a few episodes ago, that there's been distribution issues here in the state. And not to mention that all the while the illicit market is pervasive and untaxed. So, I don't know. I'm hoping to see this state turn it around, and the more doors we can get open across the state and across jurisdictions, the better, and more tax collection. So this data is not to be ignored. And I think if anything, though, I think some people call into question the real demand for cannabis, and I don't think that there's any question in my mind, especially when you see this, because Massachusetts has been around for a while, and it did kind of go through a bit of a trickier period, but now it seems to be on a nice trend. And same thing with Michigan. It was a tough open, but it's got a nice trend to it.
Yeah, so let's say California gets to Massachusetts numbers on a per capita basis. So $19.08 per person times 39 million people. So that means that California should be doing about $750 million a month, or for June. Like if it was on the per capita basis, and California did 384 million, right? So yeah, makes sense about half. If Massachusetts is 19 and California is at $9.67 per capita. So yeah, that's a lot of opportunity lost, right? $750 million monthly sales sounds pretty nice. Most markets don't do that in a year. So that's where California should be. If apples to apples, if Massachusetts consumers are able to buy that, what's the difference? I don't think someone in Boston is that different than someone in San Francisco. I really don't. So yeah, I think it just shows the opportunity cost. And also on the per capita, like one metric I have here is Florida, and Florida is at $6.98 on a per capita basis, and Florida is medical. So you're talking almost California numbers per capita, and that is strictly medical, which means you have to go out of your way to get a doctor's recommendation. And that's crazy to me. That is crazy. So yeah, California has a lot of headroom yet, and that's, I guess, maybe the good thing, right? It's not that we've hit the ceiling and we're at $20 per capita in California, but the market is still, hell in a handbasket here, like just not doing well. But instead, it's not doing well, but you can see where it could be, right? And I think as we get there in California, it'll be a very different story. So I guess maybe that's the glass half full way to look at it. But obviously, when you're in the business and you're in the market, it doesn't feel great to be like, living day to day with these kind of metrics. But if we can get to Massachusetts or even a Michigan per capita of $25 in California, that's huge. And that, that goes into tax revenue, right, for the state and all the benefits that come from it. So I think there's a real opportunity to go after. I know people are working on it, so let's hope California gets there. Maybe people can, and now that they can't buy Skittles in the grocery store, they'll have to be able to save a little money and be able to spend it more in the cannabis space, right? Share of wallet will go away from the poison candy to cannabis. That would be nice.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.